When Belisarius left Italy in 540, the Gothic War was won. When he returned in 544, the war was almost lost. Totila's position was getting stronger by the day. He had the bigger army, and he controlled the initiative while the Romans were disorganized and demoralized. Belisarius didn't have any time to spare. He would need to rebuild his army, and rebuild it quickly, all while trying to prevent Totila from shutting him out of the peninsula entirely. All the while, the biggest prize, Rome, hung in the balance. During his initial victories in 542 and 543, Totila took great care to appease the Italian people. This is most evident during his capture of Naples, when he allowed the defeated Roman garrison to flee uncontested, and he ordered his army to provide proper rations to the starving citizens of the city who had suffered greatly during his siege. Procopius really leans into Totila's generosity here, and it's led to some historians building Totila up as a kind of hero of the people, a man who understood and cared for the needs of the Italian civilians who were more or less victims of circumstance during this conflict. I don't fully buy this portrait of Totila. While he definitely wanted, at times, to be perceived as kind and just, I think his goals were mostly strategic. He knew when the support of the populace could help him win, and he also knew when he needed to instill fear and make an example. I think his stance towards Rome demonstrates this. Not long after taking Naples, he wrote a letter to the Roman Senate questioning them for siding with Belisarius in 536, pointing out how they have suffered since the conquest, and urging them to now rejoin the Ostrogoths to prevent further suffering. Such men as wrong their neighbors, being either the victims of ignorance or blinded by some forgetfulness that has come upon them, may fairly be forgiven by the victims of their ill treatment. If, however, any man does wrong as a result of deliberate intent solely, such a man will have nothing left with which even to defend his conduct. Therefore, since this is so, consider forthwith what defense you will possibly be able to make for your actions towards the Goths. Has it really come to pass that you are ignorant of the good deeds of Theodoric and Amalasuntha? Was it because you had been informed by hearsay, or learned by experience the righteousness of the Greeks towards their subjects, that you decided to abandon to them as you did the cause of the Goths and the Italians? At any rate, you, for your part, have, I think, entertained them royally, but you know full well what sort of guests and friends you have found them. For the overmastery of these men, I say, has not been a work of our valor, but I confidently maintain that a sort of vengeance has overtaken them for the wrongs that you have suffered at their hands. Give yourselves, therefore, some ground for the defense you must make to the Goths, and give us, on the other hand, some ground for forgiveness towards you. And you will give this if, without proposing to wait to the conclusion of the war, now that there is only scant hope left for you, and that to of no avail, you choose the better course, and set right the wrongs which you have committed against us. From the moment Totila sent this letter, the countdown was on. Rome was the target, and it would either surrender to the Ostrogoths, or it would be destroyed by the Ostrogoths. Belisarius would need to go to Italy to stop this threat, but he would need an army. There were men in Italy, but they were spread out in garrisons across the peninsula, and Justinian refused to reassign any of the men in the east to Belisarius in the west. Belisarius would need to recruit more men, and he would need to do it fast. He began by traveling through Thrace, his home province, and Illyricum, managing to recruit around 4,000 men to his banner. Totila, meanwhile, was taking steps to limit access to Italian ports. In January of 544, he began a siege of Hydruntum, an important port on the Italian coast. Soon after, he undertook a siege of Tibur, in the hopes of undermining his enemy's ability to resupply Rome by sailing goods from Tuscany down the Tiber River. Belisarius by this time had reached Salona and immediately took action to relieve Hydruntum. He gathered a year's worth of supplies and a relief force, and sent them across the Adriatic. The garrison at Hydruntum, in the meantime, had reached an agreement with the Ostrogoths to surrender the city on a definitive date. Procopius does not give us the exact day. When the Roman relief force made it across the sea, they found the dock completely unguarded, and they were easily able to resupply the city just 4 days before the planned date of surrender. The besiegers, realizing that they had now missed a key opportunity, retreated to join the rest of Totila's army. Totila, now aware of Belisarius' return, had sent spies to assess his enemy's strength. These spies approached Belisarius' camp in Pula, claiming to be Italians from Genoa, which was still held by a Roman garrison. They told Belisarius that Genoa was in need of a relief force, and they were welcomed into the Roman camp while they pleaded their case. This gave them the opportunity to scout the Roman army, and by the time that they left the camp, they were able to give Totila a detailed report about the enemy. While the spies were gathering their information, Totila's army entered Tibur when the citizens opened the gates and turned the city over to the Ostrogoths. The Roman garrison escaped with minimal losses, but Totila's men sacked the city and slaughtered the citizens as a signal to Rome of the devastation that it would face if they refused to surrender. A true man of the people, after all. To further limit Rome's options, Totila set a fleet out to patrol the western coast of Italy, which prevented ships carrying grain from Sicily to reach the Eternal City. Belisarius made his way into northern Italy and desperately attempted to recruit more men in Ravenna, but was unsuccessful. He then dispatched an expeditionary force through Aemilia to attempt to secure more support. There was some initial success here, but word soon reached the Roman ranks that the Danube frontier was being raided by Huns, and many of the Illyrian recruits deserted to go defend their homes and their families from a direct threat. At a time when Belisarius desperately needed to recruit more men, he was instead losing large numbers to desertion. Totila heard of the problems that the Romans were facing in Aemilia, and he sent his own small force north to engage. The Romans, though, were able to catch them in an ambush and routed them. Despite this victory, the Romans didn't have enough men to garrison in any of the towns in the region, so all the gains they made were negligible. Totila pressed his advantage further by initiating a siege at Auximum, which was a key stronghold between Rome and Ravenna. If Totila could capture the city, he would be able to tighten his grip on central Italy. Belisarius sent the army from Aemilia to relieve the Roman garrison in Auximum while he remained in Ravenna. The reinforcements were able to slip by the Ostrogoths and enter the city under cover of night. With stronger numbers, the Romans now planned to launch sorties against the Ostrogoths, but decided to send scouts out of the city to assess the enemy force and their positions before making any moves. One of the officers in the relief force was a man named Ricolus, who was one of Belisarius' personal guards. And this guy threw a wrench into the whole plan in a ludicrous way. Before the scouts could ride out on their mission, Ricolus got drunk. Really drunk. Call your ex at 1 a.m. while crying drunk. And he decided that he should conduct the reconnaissance all by himself. So Ricolus, completely sloshed, exited the city, rode directly into the Ostrogothic lines, and was promptly killed. Absolutely brilliant leadership here, just top-notch work. Now, a Roman force did ride out after him. It's not like everyone was drunk, and everyone else knew that it was a terrible idea for Ricolus to go out on his own. But all they could do was recover the body and bring it back to the city. After this, the generals decided that they did not have enough men to launch effective sorties against the Ostrogoths, who outnumbered them greatly. Because of this, it would be counterproductive to keep too many men garrisoned in the city. More men would mean they would go through the supplies quicker, after all. They wanted to keep the garrison just big enough to prevent Totila's men from breaking through, but wanted it small enough to conserve the rest of their supplies. So a portion of the Roman force would head back to Ravenna, regroup with Belisarius, and plan the next move. But a deserter from the Roman army made his way to the Ostrogothic camp and let them know when the men planned to escape. The Ostrogoths ambushed the retreating Romans, killed around 200 men, and captured their supplies. The men that survived escaped to Ariminum and joined the garrison there. Despite successfully resupplying the city, this mission for the Romans was unsuccessful overall. And after a full year in Italy, Belisarius had very little to brag about and limited options for the immediate future. He wrote to Justinian, begging him for more troops, more supplies, and more money to continue the war effort. Totila, with Belisarius struggling to contest him directly, moved on Firmum and Auximum, and both of those towns quickly fell. Spoleto fell soon afterwards. Totila now controlled most of the strongholds in Italy. He had Rome surrounded, and the city had limited options for being resupplied. It was time to go in for the kill. Rome's suffering was only just beginning.